Welcome back to the Changemaker podcast. I'm your host, Deke Copenhaver. Today, my guest is my new friend, Bob Gossom. Bob is a multidisciplinary creative whose life has taken him from the halls of the American Film Institute to the quiet edge of contemporary poetry. Gossom's early influences came handed him poetry, literature, theater, and a keen appreciation of beauty, joy, and eternity. His work is as unconventional, reflective, shaping a style that bridges the everyday reader in the literary stage. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Bob Gossom.
Welcome to the Changemaker podcast, hosted by Deke Copenhaver. Deke is the author of The Changemaker, a Forbes publishing book that has reached #1 on Amazon on multiple occasions and in multiple categories like management skills and total quality management. During this podcast, Deke interviews exceptional change-making leaders. Deke currently operates Copenhaver Consulting, where he helps local governments and other public organizations maximize their potential. He's also a sought-after public speaker. We hope that the Changemaker has an impact on you today and that you find takeaways that make you a better leader in your life. Now, here's Deke.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great to have you. So Bob, you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I am a poet myself, not of your level. I've just read through some of your stuff. It's very vivid. Some of it's sensual. But let me ask you this: how do modern audiences receive poetry? Because I'm not really good at that world. It seems like that it might not be as appreciated in some circles as it once was. What's your take on that?
Well, you're preaching to the choir on that. There is a very small group of people that like poetry.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, it's way too small. I think that poetry seemed to lose its way in the popular culture some time ago, and I can't tell you how. If you want to strike fear into the eyes of someone, tell them, "Hey, you want to read 5 pages of poetry?" It's they'll almost run screaming for the doors. But that's one reason why I did my stage show, and I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but we got actors and a wonderful director, Sonny Lira, and did a stage production of my poetry, and the audiences just responded wonderfully. So I think there's I think as poets, there's there are things we can do to help fix this.
Well, I always think that everything old is new again, and I do see the younger generation. I mean, there are a lot of teenage and 20-somethings that I know that are actually getting off social media, if you can believe it. And I had a young man that's a good friend of mine that's in his 20s, one of my best friend's son, and we were talking about my podcast. He said, I was reading that podcasts are actually giving my generation longer attention spans because it's much longer than just a snippet. And I'm like, so I don't, I'm not willing to say poetry is dead by any means. And I think it will have a resurgence, but it takes people like you being out there doing it. I've been active in writing, not reading, but so thank you for keeping that dying art alive.
Well, you're welcome. But art and inspiration is funny. It wasn't a choice on my part.
So you had to do it.
I had to do it. Poems began just coming to me, and it would seem very ungracious to not write them down.
Well, and that's what I've told my wife. I'm like, we have spiritual gifts, all of us, that we're meant to use. I firmly believe, but but it takes a lot of courage. And I want to get your take on this too, because I would tell people whether it was, I wrote a book a number of years ago, but anything you write, I always pictured it as a child. And when you put it out there into the world, there can be some people that love your child, some people that don't care at all, but you're emotionally invested into what you write.
Yes, kind of. Um, I poetry for me is just always, if there's one place in my life where I feel comfortable and confident, it's in my poetry. It's
Yeah.
in my writing. And in that sense, I will have to tell you, there's a side of me that does not care what anybody else thinks,
And that's good.
because it speaks to me, it expresses me, it make I always said, people always in college, the professors asked the wrong question. They didn't ask how writing poetry made me feel.
Yep.
And I'd write a poem that really worked, and I would literally just be high for days. And I've almost lost friendships because I want to shove it in front of everybody. Hey, I can't believe this page isn't glowing with light. I want to shove it in front of everybody's face that I see, and that doesn't always work as well.
No, well, it's so funny. So I've lived pretty much a life of service because that's what's in my heart. I served in public office. I ran a land conservation nonprofit and handled the green space program. I'm heading up our hurricane recovery outfit right now. But, but it's all the stuff that, and I know my wife gets sick. I've never enjoyed learning more than I do now. But so I have to come home and I'm new to disaster recovery. So I'm learning all the time. But my sister, when we were kids, and I actually just went to my boyhood home in Montreal last weekend, first time back in 54 years. But when I would get home from kindergarten, I would have to tell my sister everything I learned. And she would go and lock herself in the bathroom and stick her fingers in her ears and say, "No, no, no, I cannot hear you." So that's kind of like some of the experience that you have with your friends that are like, "Okay, okay." My wife, I get that from my wife as well.
Yeah. Yep. Well, our wives are sometimes long suffering.
Yes, well, I would say that, God bless her for, so I do a lot of public speaking, but she's like, "Oh, well, I might not come." I'm like, "You don't have to come. You've heard it all 100 times before."
Yeah.
Well, let me get your take on this too, though. So about a year ago, I got off of all social media. I pushed aside the mainstream media for the most part. I've been reading voraciously, listening to podcasts and everything, but I think, as probably most people in the world are, I'm fascinated with artificial intelligence, with AI. But I was listening to something yesterday that said, "Oh, well, when it first came out, it's like, well, it's great with math, and even the language was really bad. It took a long time, and people are like, well, it can't write poetry." Well, now AI does write poetry, but somebody told me at one point, they said AI is going to take over the world, and I said I don't think so, because you can't program a soul. So nothing that a machine produces has your spirit in it. I mean, there is no spirit in a machine. I'm getting a little esoteric here with you, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, it's difficult. I actually am a big user of AI in my in my life. I like you, I'm a lifelong learner, and when it came out a couple of years ago, I said, either this is going to be here, I'm going to need to learn how to use it. And I found it to be a wonderful tool in my daily life in terms of just navigating, getting assembling information. um, but I've actually found I've been using it as a brainstorming tool in my writing. uh, like you say, I mean, I don't ask it to write a poem for me, but sometimes when I'm working on a poem, I'm getting started, I'll say, one of my favorite poems the last few years, it was, I made a trip to Africa a few years ago with the family, and the word bushmeat, and the concept of bushmeat, I was I had heard of it, but really exposed to it. And that word, this is what happens to me. The word just rolled around in my head for a year. And I knew I wanted to write a poem about bushmeat. And
roadkill.
well, and roadkill, yeah. Well, that came later. And I tried writing it. I wrote some poems. It just, none of it worked. None of it worked. And then as I think, I guess I sent you that poem.
Yeah.
I was driving with my daughter in the car, and she said, "Oh, look at the roadkill." And all of a sudden, bushmeat, roadkill, those two words began bouncing back and forth in my head. And I knew that they sound the same. They have two syllables. They were both about death. They were both about animals. And I get to this point where I knew there was this poem cooking, but I didn't know what. So I went on to ChatGPT and I said, "Give me some images about bushmeat and roadkill." And it laid out 20 images, and down around number 18, there was just a little violence. And again, a thing went off in my head. This is about death and violence, and boom, the poem came. And I didn't use any of their images, but I did use ChatGPT as a brainstorming technique.
Yeah.
So I'm one of my lives was as a techie. I'm not afraid of tech. I think that we use tools.
Well, it's funny, and I'd love to get your take on this too. I mean, you have a unique set of life experiences that, being a techie, but also being a poet and a lot of different stuff. But so I do podcasts, I do public speaking, I did a radio show for a while, but I think, and grew up writing and painting and all of this stuff, had an artistic upbringing as well. But I can always tell if I'm connecting with my audience. Like speaking, it's all extemporaneous, because I think that it's almost like going live without a net. So when you connect with your audience. So do you look for that and wonder how your poetry is connecting with an audience, or do you just put it out there and let it go?
Well, when you write a book, you put it out there, you have no idea about the response.
Yeah.
But as this goes back to our earlier concept of when poetry is presented, it's received differently. So when I'm reading a poem, you can tell when audiences, all of a sudden their eyes light up.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful for you as a poet to see the response. You can actually see it. But there's a classic aspect, and I think it applies to poetry, especially once I write a poem and I have a concept for it. I know what it means. Sometimes I don't. I put it out there. Once I put it out there, it's not my poem anymore. Once you read it, it's your poem. And that I actually try in my work to make places for the reader to insert themselves. I wrote a poem about living with pain, emotional pain, and I never specified what the pain was. I talked about what it was like to live with it. And so and I did that consciously because, what was the famous, I think it was Wordsworth or it was Tolstoy, every family's pain is different. He had a wonderful quote about, but everybody's family is the same, even though the dynamic is different. The interesting is how do we live with our feelings and our emotions. It's less important what mine is. I want to give you a space to put yours into it.
Well, and it makes me think of, did you ever see the John Lennon documentary Imagine?
I might have a long time ago.
Great documentary. I think that was back during the 80s. But so he and Yoko were at their English country estate, and somebody, got onto the property. And I think the gentleman had been doing some extracurriculars, but they brought him in and fed him breakfast. And he said, "Oh man, I just want to tell you, John, that you wrote that song, named a Beatles song." He said, "You wrote that song for me." And he was like, "Mate, I wrote that song for myself. But if you can see yourself in it," so that's what I've always felt like as a speaker, as a podcaster, as a writer. If I love if somebody can read as they read your words or listen to your words, they can see themselves within it. Somehow. It's not, we write for our own reasons, but if there's that connection point, like John Lennon had with the guy he was feeding breakfast, I don't think John specifically sat down and said, "I'm going to write one for this guy," but it's that connection point if they can see themselves in it.
Well, that's what great artists do. They speak to you directly.
Hmm.
I decades ago, I went to a Rolling Stones concert, and I walked out of that concert knowing that if Mick Jagger and I could spend an hour or two together, we'd be best friends.
No, and
because I just got that connection,
oh, but that's the thing to me. And I'll tell you, I was, as I say, I was just in Montreal. Nicest people I've ever met for big city dwellers. And I'm like, the media, mainstream media and social media and politics portray us as this world horribly divided. But it's things like the arts and poetry and painting. And there's so many more things that connect us. But I think the human experience of experiencing the arts together, whether it's a Rolling Stones concert or just going to listen to a speaker, whatever, going to a festival, those are nourishing for the soul. Where to me, there is no real nourishment in social media. I mean, it's basically dopamine, saccharine. But if I think any generation, if you get them into that setting where it's sort of a communal vibe, they get that we are tribal animals and that we're not supposed to be alone, in my opinion, sitting in front of a computer screen the whole time of our whole lives.
Right, right. And people, I think, people always want connection.
Yeah.
They want to be seen and heard, and they want to know that you saw them and heard them. And I think that's deeply meaningful to almost everybody.
Well, it's interesting. I started a non-denominational prayer breakfast my first day in office in 2005. Well, 20 years later, it's still going great guns, but it's brought people from different walks of life throughout the community together on common ground. You've got people that would have never met had they not started coming to this. But I was saying this morning that so our recovery and restoration efforts here in Augusta. So I'm like, this is the best chance we have to heal into the broken parts of our community. But an older gentleman said, you get to be retirement age and you start thinking, well, I want comfort. I'm just going to stay where I'm comfortable. He said, we need to get outside our comfort zones. I said, that is the opportunity that we have here, but it goes to people being seen, to go and help people rebuilding and restoring their homes and their lives, but do it face to face. I mean, that's the opportunity that a disaster gives you. We have the opportunity to really make that connection and to heal by making people know that they are seen, they're heard, and they have not been forgotten about.
Yeah, I had along that line too is that timing is everything. I had a mentor who had a saying, that you help people when they need it.
Yep.
That and because not only when they need it is physically when they need help, but emotionally,
Yeah.
that's when they can when it really speaks to them.
Well, and another thing too that I've noticed is, you know, people enjoy cross-generational learning. I'm like, I think I used to be, when I was in my 30s, I was the youngest this or that, the youngest board member, the youngest that. Now I turned 58 on Thursday. Now I'm no longer the youngest, but I enjoy being around younger people and learning from them. And what I've found is that they want mentors and want people to teach across generations.
Yeah. Yeah. Our society tends to kind of silo us,
Yeah.
but it's not that hard to break out of your silo if it's something that's important to you.
No,
Um,
not at all. It's and it's just it's so needed these days. But I go back to just looking at a TV set or a computer screen, unless you're out there with the people. I mean, if you silo yourself in that way, that's a very lonely and scary place to be, because that's just everything is just doom and gloom. And that here again, society is horribly broken and it can never be fixed or anything. I'm like, I don't get that. I didn't get that feeling walking around the streets of Montreal, and I don't get that walking around the streets of Augusta either.
yeah. Yeah. It yeah, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah. My, I I always tend to find kindred spirits in the most interesting places. But so what are your future plans? What's your next big project, or you what?
Well, I take it a chunk at a time. I have a new edition of my book coming out in February, and I'm kind of focused on that right now.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's and you know, a year and a half ago, I did the stage play.
Uh huh.
That consumed me for 6 months, uh, and then we filmed that, and I had to turn that into a film that consumed me for another year almost. And now I'm pushing this book. I'm prepping a new edition of my book. I'm actually looking forward to not having a project and just get and writing a little more, because all these other activities, as wonderful as they are, distract me.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
so for our viewers and listeners, plug the book.
well, my goodness, I don't have a copyright. I write with me. I'll get it. My book is called The Human Equation, and it's based on the title comes from one of the poems, The Human Equation, which is actually a ghazal, an Arabic, Urdu Arabic form. Anyway, I'm getting lost in the weeds. Um, I, I, I have a new book coming out in February, and because I'm not the most prolific of writers, so it isn't like I'm going to. A new book for me is the my past work with new pieces added on.
Okay.
So there are about 8 or 9 new poems in the new book coming out. So it just gets longer. Uh, there's a kind of an old tradition in poetry of doing this. Walt Whitman published this way, and those are good footsteps to follow. And I figure I've always been I've been more concerned with oh, here's my book.
Look at that.
Uh,
Yay.
man. Um, it I've never been concerned with being for a long time. I'm not concerned with being prolific. I like to wait for my poems.
Yeah.
I like to wait till I have something to say. I like to work on them. For me to do 50 new poems might take another 25 years. So.
But I love the fact that you write in a creative fashion.
Thank you. Yeah, the earliest poem in my book, I think I wrote when I was 18. And the most recent one will be one I wrote this year. So
I love that. I might have to try that, but it tells a life story, and I like the idea of being a creative. I think so often it's this new organization I was running. We've had a lot of local organizations that are sort of competitive. They don't always play well in the field together, and I'm like, we're here not to get into anybody else's lane. We're here to be a value add or accretive to the ecosystem that already exists here. And when you talk about words like accretive and ecosystems and everything to people who have been butting heads in their field, it's easy for me to understand. It's easy for you to understand. It's not always easy for people that feel like there's a scarcity mindset. There's not going to be enough to go around. So I love the way that you're publishing your books. So as we get down towards the end, and I'm sure we could talk all day, and I'm sure we will talk again, and I'd love to have you back on to talk a little bit more because I've never had a poet on my podcast. So this has been a tremendous treat for me to be able to talk about poetry with you. But so where can people find you?
Well, the easiest way is my website. It's really hard to find, bobgossom.com.
Yep.
And I'm trying to be more active, well, on social media, just to help raise awareness. But my website is the best place. And actually, in line with how I'm publishing my book, I also have a philosophy where I don't want someone to buy one of my books. Then I'm coming a new book in February. My current book is still on sale.
Yeah.
So I don't want someone to feel like, oh, I just bought his book. He came out with a new one. I've got to buy a new one to get 5 more poems. So every poem I've written since my first book, I put on my website.
Okay.
So you buy the book once, you'll be able to read everything I write.
All right. Well, so my final question.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So
no, go ahead.
So if you want to learn, if you want to read my poetry, there's a lot of it there.
Well, good deal. Well, my last question I always like to ask my guests is on a daily basis, what puts a smile on your face and brings joy to your heart?
Well, I mean, we get corny, but I look at my wife in the morning and I smile. But being awake, being alive, seeing the sun. We have trees on our property, seeing the light through the trees. I've always enjoyed being alive, and that's my joy.
Well, it's having come through cancer 2 years ago, it makes you introspective, but it makes you appreciate everything more. And I'm like, okay, I'd rather spend quality time with close friends or family members, not in a crowd setting, or go for a walk and experience the beauty of nature. It is the little stuff at the end of the day.
Yeah, I can relate to that. You get to a certain age, you have health issues and stuff. It's made me focus on, keeping my life tied up. If I'm gone tomorrow, one of my big fears is I'll leave a poem half written. So there's almost this incentive every day. If I've got a poem, I've got to finish it. Because boy, I'd hate to have one half done.
But I will, as we close, I will tell you, I love what you got back to saying that you do this because you have to, and you're just moved to, or you're called to, because I've always felt the same way. And my life has taken twists and turns, and I'm like, I go where the most need is, and it doesn't really line up with the other people. Well, why are you not trying to climb the corporate ladder or do this or sell 1 million books of poetry? It's not, that's not the point of why we do what we do.
No. Uh, the goal is a good life.
Exactly.
Everything else flows from that.
Absolutely. Well, Bob, I will tell you, thank you for being an absolutely amazing guest, and I look forward to having you back.
I'd love to come back.
Well, sounds good.
And-
That's all the time that we've got. Dropping the
Okay.
mic. We are out. Hey guys, thanks for listening to or watching the Changemaker podcast today. Greatly appreciate it. If you're listening and you want to see the video, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deke Copenhaver. That's a pretty easy to remember, I would think. But really, we also want to remind you to like, subscribe, rate across all platforms, download. And if you're looking for a coach, a speaker, or anything, you know where to find me. Just email me at me@dekecopenhaver.com. And thanks so much for listening.